Hey guys, this is the man on the street. Let me give you an example how my life has been for the last 4 years. We don't have to say about those areas, the annexed regions, where it's a pivotal point in the Black Sea, where it's contested by many regions, not only by NATO obligated countries, but also by countries in that region, including Russia and Turkey, that shares the Strait of Bosphorus. It is a main reason why Israel talks about the Suez Canal, right? The lead up to Israel's doctrine of those shipments coming from India and Israel. It's a lot of money to passageway to make that powerful nation rich as it is to buy those bomb and artillery that it might need to protect its border services. But let's just say, for example, Russia and Turkey are both divided when you're asking obligation, but this isn't post war 1945 that led up after the Korean War, which is still a contested DMZ zone. So it's still ongoing to know what it means. But what it means also that if you have dissidents who are Russian, who are opposed exactly know what it means about your American U.S. policies, you don't have to ask those countries what is enough and eight isn't what we're talking about. When you're talking about regions like now, they're talking about, for example, how they doctrine Ukraine's philosophy, what led into World War II, which almost changed the world history when you had those German sides who were following those dictatorships of the Nazi embolism. What it all was a doctrine of the say what led after Normandy invasion, which led into the ideas how we confront those many nations of different ethnicities will not fly straight. Now, for example, that NX region where built up those hostilities led into the articles of war, which is not too different when U.S. invaded Iraq. At this time, Russia didn't oppose it aside, but they knew what it went when he said, what would the U.S. coalition forces say after they give that doctrine? For example, we knew what led up to this Desert Shield when the U.S. administration for Trump, we knew weeks before, even with Sean Penn or Larry King or Larry David might say what is happening, but you have to understand if Iraq did get invaded, why is Israel so doctrined about to say, U.S., my big brother, come and help me fight the big alley with the corner men standing with their bats and chains? Right? Now, this was a turf war that led up to the hostilities after 20 years of those areas that try to live cohabitably without their own decree of U.S. intervention. Sometimes we know why U.S. servicemen go there to exercise their idea of uniformly having peace. Now, when you have those regions, you can't ask the U.S. servicemen who actually went into harm's way try to help. Now, after we agreed to say we disagree, it didn't help at all, but it furthered infraction. That's what helped Israel to say about those regions when they destabilized it. Now, after many years, children grew up in the side of those camps. Hallowed by the name, we have the different Christians, different ethnicities, Catholics, Roman Catholics, Orthodox, ultra Orthodox, Sharia law, Muslim, Sharia law, Sunni law, and we go on and on. It's like a litany. But at the end of the day, what really matters is those people who govern those nations, they know the mass index of refugees. The goods and service they need that we throw away hundreds of pounds of thousands of hundreds of pounds of food that they know would circumvent those ideas. Now, when you're living by those sheltered areas, you would go where the sheltered areas needed of those resources. But when we see those U.S. servicemen disparaging when you have the ZZs or other types of fringe groups that are caught with the coalition forces that once supported them, well, this is what we have. We have confrontation, and we have dismay, and we have a litany of problems. Now, Canada stands only now unified than any other country in any point of history because Canadians know what their peace initiative didn't make them weaker, it made them stronger. The U.S. dominance to be the world police stage to make sure After 20 years, who did they oppose to if their example said they had migrants run all the way to Yemen to support those people who we knew were dismayed? Now, that's why we say when the U.S. reports those things, those goods and services going to through Israel ports to Mediterranean to Europe. Europe is a conglomerated region where it has lots of echelons of high class and high resources. But after we knew the elderly in Ukraine, in Middle East, Beirut, Palestine, Gaza, all those regions when we add up, even when we're talking Indochina and we're talking about Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Jakarta, they know very well what works for their country might not work so well after tourism has been curtailed because of the hostilities. Now, going forward, the predicament that's set before the NATO obligated, and we're talking about actually NORAD, which falls in the idea how U.S. and Russia and Canada is smack down in the middle. You understand what I'm saying? Now, we just have to look at what those regions are saying when you're asking about those same countries, when they're saying, the U.S. policy has overstayed their welcome because we realize those NATO obligation coalition forces were put in harm's way when we actually say, what were they actually thinking when they invaded Iraq? Now, the three architects of them is Bush, is the president who led up to, for example, Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld. No matter how you and I might talk over a drinking game of foosball and about this man, what are we going to do over here? We said to those nations just as we said at those when we warred with them, right? So when we're asking about how it philosophizes, what would it say? No one likes to say that, for example, if they have a coalition member, Army reservists, serving their country in the U.S. or in UK, Italy, and at that time, they were obligated because they supported that. So at the end of the day, we knew leading up to 2010, the war wasn't as popular and it's not popular today. That's why the U.S. resentment is going towards in-house stages of protest, just like we figured in Vietnam, but it's elevated. Do you understand? So when we're arguing these arguments, we don't have to point fingers at each other. We'll only look at the conditioning. Now, for example, Biden at his stage of his presidency, leading into November, it's only about 6 months away. We're not seeing the galvanized approach about America, the great country it is, to sustain the world's population of that wealth. Take that away, my friends, we're in dire straits. That is why we must think thoroughly before any U.S. administration with any country to abide themselves to know where exactly Trump himself faces. When we're asking those same questions about the democracy that we're upholding, Biden has to think of that thoroughly. Very well so, when we know that the capitalistic ways of those wealth has bankrupted America. My friend, steady, hold, and fast.